In only a few decades, we've gone from playing on retro machines with 2D games, and they're all controlled by a couple of buttons, to being able to completely control games using nothing but our mind. With all this rapid improvement in technology, it really begs the question, what will gaming be like in the near future? Let's find out.
In 2024, the most common tech we use for gaming are computers with mouse and keyboard, as well as consoles with controllers. This allows us to play 3D games on a 2D monitor. However, as improvements in technology takes place, we're seeing a shift from 2D to 3D displays. We're entering a new era of gaming where the technology we use to both create and play games is improving rapidly. Today we're going to go into how that's going, as well as how we're shifting the experience from 3D to 4D to further trick our brains into thinking the virtual worlds are real. And if that isn't enough, there's an emerging technology that will allow us to go even further and achieve 5D gaming. But more on that later. Now, in order to appreciate the technology of the future, you should understand where our current level is at, as well as what we tend to focus on when trying to improve our gaming technology. Well, to begin with, one of the main priorities developers have when improving games is increasing their level of immersion. It took decades of development to get to the technology we have today, where games are able to thrive in creating realistic environments that have thought-out mechanics and engaging gameplay. While we do have the 3D displays on VR, which attempts to place you in the game, it tends to be a little bit more clunky and unrefined and is generally quite limited. Whereas games that are made for standard devices are typically more polished, with bigger worlds and a lot more to do. Now of course, getting to this point did take a while. We started with 2D games like Pong back in 1972 that allowed for vertical movement, and then Pac-Man in 1980 that added horizontal control. As the technology began evolving, we shifted from 2D to 3D environments, such as in big titles like Doom and Ultima, both bringing more detailed and colored environments than we'd ever seen before. And then when we look at the games of today, we're at a point where we're trying to see how big we can make the worlds and how realistic we can make things like the graphics, the engines, and just everything that runs the game. Now, while we may have shifted the game worlds to 3D, as said before, the devices we typically play them on are still only 2D, so it isn't able to completely absorb the player into the world. But that doesn't mean we can't develop ways to help us achieve greater immersion. So, how do we go about doing this? Two primary things we tend to focus on are sensory realism, which refers to sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, as well as behavioral realism, which refers to how believable the player's interaction is with the world, the characters, and everything in it. The goal here is to have all of these be as lifelike as possible, while still keeping the benefit that virtual games have of creating a world that is unlike our own. Now, this dynamic is pretty hard to balance, but a good reference point for how this can be simulated well would be Ready Player One. The technology shown in this movie transports the player into a virtual world called the Oasis, where they can feel and interact with the people and the environment around them. In 2024, virtual reality is a technology that is widely known but not very widely used. Even though the story is set in 2045, to some degree we can already replicate what we see in the movie. Now, what makes this level of realism possible is the VR headset, the omnidirectional treadmill, the full-body haptic feedback solutions, the audio systems, as well as a highly immersive and realistic simulated game world. We currently have all of this technology, albeit fairly rudimentary versions of it. But there's no doubt that we're on track to creating a similar level of realism shown in Ready Player One. And at the rate we're going, it'll likely be way before 2045. Combining all of these technologies is what will convert VR from being 3D displays and audio to the level of immersion we see in 4D cinemas, where the chairs move to simulate movement, and your senses are all stimulated with wind and aromas being blasted at you. So, in terms of sensory realism, we have VR headsets from companies like Meta and Valve that are quite advanced, with high-resolution displays and built-in audio. Our haptic feedback solutions are limited, but we do have products like TESLASUIT which can not only simulate feedback, but is also capable of full-body tracking, as well as gloves that allow you to feel virtual reality. When looking at a level of behavioral realism, we have omnidirectional treadmills like Infinideck and Omni that allow for fairly natural movement in-game, with motion capture technology helping to provide more fluid and realistic animations, as well as procedural animation, which dynamically adjusts the character's movement based on the game environment. There are also physics engines capable of simulating realistic interactions, and the technology behind NPCs has been steadily improving over the years.
So, what we have now is pretty good, but it's clear there are a lot of limitations that we're encountering. For one, not only are we trying to simulate everything in a realistic way, but it also has to be available for the average person. Some of the main reasons VR isn't as popular as it could be is due to how much it costs to buy all the gear, how much room it takes to have it all, and how a lot of it isn't actually that well developed yet.
You can grab a Quest 3 for about 450 quid, which is actually pretty cheap when you consider that it can do full body tracking, AR features, and play games all without needing a computer. However, if you want a more immersive and believable experience, you're gonna have to fork out an extra 1.3k for an omnidirectional treadmill, as well as 13 grand for a haptic feedback suit. Like, dude, what? Realistically, these technologies aren't even worth considering as an average consumer. But if that wasn't bad enough, our ability to replicate taste and smell is pretty lackluster as well. Among all the hardware limitations we have, there's also the software side, where the game worlds tend to be a lot more restrictive and the systems definitely aren't as fluid as traditional systems. One of the main things that tied all of the technology shown in Ready Player One together was the Oasis, which is their metaverse. This allowed the players to join a huge connected game world with a variety of things you can do. And while we do see this in VR chat, as well as meta with, well, the metaverse, it's clear there's a fair bit of development needed in every area before we get to the level of realism needed to pull us into the game.
There's also the question of whether there's even enough interest in VR to see these technology developments happen anytime soon. Well, fortunately for us, we're now seeing a lot of companies dip their toes in the VR market. And with that, we're bound to see a ton of innovation in the near future. Meta recently announced they're going to allow third-party tech companies and software developers to use their operating system, Horizon OS. Now, the implications of this are huge. Having a centralized place where games and the technology behind them can all be developed would help synergize the software and the hardware, and ultimately, it'd bring us closer to that high level of immersion we're looking for.
Over time, VR headsets will have their resolution improved, as well as field of view and depth perception. Our treadmills will become more accessible for the average consumer, with even companies like Disney already innovating this technology with their new Holotile floor. And in fact, a company called FreeAim recently showcased their VR shoes, which is another interesting and significantly less bulky solution than omnidirectional treadmills. Our haptic feedback solutions will get so good that they can accurately replicate the sensations felt in the virtual world, and our audio will be seamlessly integrated. But of course, you're probably wondering how things like taste and smell can be replicated, right? Well, it seems like a challenging but exciting hurdle. With tech from startup companies like Sentient that can already mimic a large number of smells, as well as devices that use electrodes to replicate the taste and texture of food. Kinda weird tech, and they're very much so in the early stages, but they're very interesting solutions.
I've been following VR tech for a long time, and as we've seen new iterations come out, we've seen small but rather significant improvements. So, as both interest from consumers and companies grow, we're going to see a lot more innovation in the years to come. It's going to be like an exponential growth. So, what technologies then are going to be the center of gaming in the near future? Let's find out. Alright, so alongside virtual reality, both augmented reality and artificial intelligence are already changing the way we interact with the gaming world, but very soon it's going to be impossible to ignore them. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned how we're already able to control games using nothing but our mind. Now that refers to an emerging technology that's going to revolutionize not only how we play games, but also just how we live our lives day to day. Now, it's also what could theoretically take us to 5D gaming, but before we get into that, let's shift our focus as to what 4D gaming is going to be like, as well as what challenges we might encounter along the way. So, let's get into it.
So, we've already gone over the improvements needed to bring our levels of realism closer to real life. Mark Zuckerberg was talking about this idea of a visual Turing test. This is akin to the Turing test for AI, which is a test that was created by Alan Turing back in 1950 that tries to evaluate whether a machine can pass as a human. When it comes to the visual Turing test, the goal here is to try and determine whether what we perceive in mixed reality is distinguishable from real life. As we've already discovered, a lot of the games of today do have realistic graphics and engines, but the way we play them prevents us from being tricked into thinking it's actually real. The change from 2D displays to 3D has brought us closer, with the visual and audio engagement providing more depth and realistic spatial awareness. But when we add physical effects like haptic feedback and treadmills, that's when we start to enter the realm of 4D, and how we begin to crack the visual Turing test. Artificial intelligence is one of the main technologies in the rapid improvement towards creating this level of realism. We're constantly finding new ways that AI can help streamline our creative processes. Now, there are many different types of AI, but the one we're using are capable of procedural content generation, allowing it to create large amounts of game content from terrain, characters, buildings, and items. This not only saves time for the developers, but also allows them to scale it up now that everything has been simplified.
meaning bigger maps with more variety and detail.
I've heard that the new GTA is rumored to have around 70% of the buildings enterable, all of which would be uniquely generated and designed by AI. If true, this would be groundbreaking for the future of open world games. I'd like to go more into that topic in another video, so follow along if that's something you want to see. While procedural generation can exist without AI, incorporating AI techniques can significantly improve the complexity, variety, and quality of the generated content. Another way in which AI is likely to change gaming is the introduction of NPCs that use natural language processing, like ChatGPT. While this would be a nice feature in GTA 6, I don't feel like the technology is at the point where Rockstar would want to implement it. But there is already a mod for Skyrim that lets you do it, as well as a bunch of other applications that do the same thing for other games.
Making you a traitor. Treason is punishable by death.
Do you have anything to say to that, Jarl?
I deny these false accusations. I have never betrayed the people of Skyrim. I am innocent.
It works by using a type of AI known as a large language model, which is able to generate a response using context. This basically means that players can have much more natural conversations with them, making them feel like they're actually a part of the world, rather than a scripted robot that just repeats the same lines over and over again. This seems like such a fun feature that can add so much depth to a game, and when combined with the procedural generation, as well as improvements in areas like physics and animation, I really believe AI is one of the most impactful creations in the history of the world. The capability for it to massively speed up our rate of evolution in not only gaming, but also other areas of life as well, is incredible. But again, we're going to save that for another video.
Okay, but where does augmented reality fit into all of this? Well, for AR, I like to think back to when Pokemon Go was released. Everyone was walking around on their phones, quite obviously all doing the same thing. This game brought Pokemon to real life, using real world locations and even implementing augmented reality in a fairly basic form. But as this tech develops, you're definitely going to see a similar theme of people walking around with AR glasses, where the game is seamlessly overlaid onto the real world. We've seen this tech in the past with the HoloLens from Microsoft, as well as MetaQuest 3 mixed reality, and most recently Apple's Vision Pro. These give us a glimpse of the future, and as improvements are made and devices become smaller, there's no doubt in my mind that people will begin accepting this tech into their lives. Alright, so with the capability of overlaying virtual elements on top of the real world, as well as virtual reality becoming significantly more immersive, what changes is it going to have to our everyday lives, and how is this actually going to feel? Well, one could argue that it'd be taking us further away from real life. However, I'd counter that with the idea that being able to create and experience virtual worlds that are essentially replications of our wildest dreams is something worth striving for. It will add so much more depth to life. It could help deepen our knowledge by allowing us to experience anything at any given time.
Just imagine being able to travel to another planet or deep into our very own oceans,
Where you can feel what it would be like without the fear of dying.
I'm both terrified and amazed by the ocean, so being able to experience it fully knowing that I won't actually die
Might actually be manageable.
Or by combining AR and AI, you can get real-time updates and information about the environment around you. Maybe by identifying a cool bird you've seen and adding it to some form of bestiary based on real-world animals you've encountered over time. There's no shortage of ways in which these technologies could be used to expand our understanding and general experience of life. These kind of technologies are often viewed as negative as they take you away from the real world. And while there are definitely concerns that we'll go into in a minute, I believe that it has the opportunity to help people explore their interests in a way that wouldn't otherwise be plausible.
The idea of gaming being an activity where you're typically sitting down, barely moving, will be a thing of the past, and instead, it can make gaming much more active and engaging in so many different ways.
With all of this being said, it is kind of easy to see that there are limitations and a few ethical problems that we need to overcome. Of course, we have the hardware problems like bulky, expensive devices,
As well as unoptimized, clunky software. However, it's not until we look at the ethical problems that we realize how much of an impact this could have on society.
One of the main problems is this idea that this can become extremely addictive. There's no doubt that a number of people would use this technology as a means of escapism, where they can ignore reality and live in a virtual world away from the issues of life. This dreamlike world would be free from major problems and would be the perfect place for someone to go if they ever needed to clear their head. If this sounds both positive and negative, that's because it is. Humans have a habit of always wanting more, which can be used to motivate us to achieve great things, but can also be used to send us down a path of self-destruction. How we use the technology will strongly dictate whether it proves to benefit or harm us. Everything in moderation after all. Then there's the question of how content, specifically adult content, is regulated, as well as how accessible the technology is for the average person. Ideally, we want this tech to be available for everyone, but the proper regulations will need to be in place to avoid it being used for the wrong reasons.
Alright, it goes without saying then, that the advancement in these technologies is going to have its hurdles. But I believe by this time, a lot of these issues are either going to be resolved, or they won't be so negatively impactful to where it destroys society. Ongoing research and development in these technological innovations will create more affordable, efficient, and user-friendly hardware and software solutions. We're in a generation where spreading awareness has become a lot easier. So with the rise of online educators, the internet, and large language models, we can ideally educate and spread awareness about any potential problems that might occur. And this is why the advancement in AI, AR, and VR is all very, very exciting. Because it's not only going to change the way we game, but also the way we learn, work, and experience culture.
Education will change dramatically, with virtual education benefiting from the fact that you can simulate anything, which will help to deepen our understanding of any topic we're trying to learn. Then of course, the boom in remote work we've seen following the pandemic will increase even more, with virtual workspaces allowing us to do a lot of jobs without having to physically be there, which is a concept already seen with the metaverse. AI is obviously an incredible tool that can help teach us any subject that we're interested in, almost as if you're talking to a professional. In fact, GPT-5 from OpenAI is said to bring PhD level intelligence. To give you perspective, GPT-3 had similar intelligence to a toddler, and GPT-4 could be compared to a smart high school student. So to jump up to PhD level, hopefully in only a year's time, will be an incredible leap in capability. We've been using VR to train astronauts and the military for decades, but with all of this tech advancing rapidly, the possibilities are only going to improve. However, alongside AI, there is another emerging technology that could revolutionize gaming. Even with the tech of the near future, we are still limited by how we interact with the game world. Our input still either requires physical movement or the use of a controller. But as we go further into the future, that all changes with the introduction of brain-computer interfaces into the world of gaming. So, let's take a look at how a future filled with brain implants could change the way we play games, as well as how it could affect society as a whole. We'll also go into how this technology could take us into the realm of 5D gaming.
So, brain-computer interfaces have been around for over 50 years. To put it simply, it is a device that allows direct communication between your brain and an external device like a computer or your phone. It's a really exciting technology that has so many applications, like controlling an artificial limb, restoring vision, and of course what you're here for, controlling a game using nothing but your mind. Now, we've seen this done before with electroencephalograms or EEGs. This tech uses electrodes that are placed on the head, which will then read the signals sent from your brain. It is currently extremely limited and in no way really that practical, but it's incredible how much we can already achieve. Now, Neuralink is a company founded by Elon Musk that has been working on an efficient and powerful brain-computer interface, and so far they've made incredible progress. Meet Noland Arbor, the first human to test the N1 chip. This chip is the size of a coin, with a total of 1,024 electrodes distributed across 64 threads, each thinner than a strand of hair. The threads are carefully placed by a robot and can be implanted anywhere depending on the intended purpose. Noland had the chip implanted back in January and allows him to control a cursor using only his thoughts. Thanks to this, he's been able to play games again, from chess to Civilization and even Mario Kart. Now, it has had complications, most notably with a large number of the threads retracting, but they've since been able to change the way spikes in neurons are measured, making it function even better than it was before, despite only 15% of the threads remaining. They're also planning to implant an improved version on a second person by the time this video goes live, so it'd be cool to see how that goes. If you want to keep updated with Noland, you can find him on Twitter. Oh, and don't forget Neuralink as well. Now, even if Neuralink aren't the ones to get this tech to the level that we're really hoping for, to where we can use it in video games, there are plenty of other companies that are trying their hand in the EEGs or brain-computer interfaces. So there's no doubt that it's going to break its way into the gaming landscape at some point, and when it does, it's going to completely revolutionize everything. So let's take a look at how it currently controls games, as well as how it could in the future. Right now, there are two ways of controlling. First, you have attempted movement, which is when you actively try to think about moving your arm as if you're trying to move the cursor. Then there's imagined movement, which is a lot less intuitive, but allows the user to move the cursor simply by thinking. These are both currently possible, and the speed and accuracy is close to or greater than what is currently possible with the devices we use today. Think about it, right now if we're playing a shooter, our brain has to react to what it's seeing and send a signal to the arm to move the mouse. And then you have all the latency that occurs afterwards. But with this, the time it takes to react would be significantly shorter, and would essentially give you aimbot.
So you'll be able to play shooters like Call of Duty.
Yeah, that brings up another thing. Like, I basically have an aimbot in my head. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah, they'll probably have like different leagues for people like me because it's just not fair.
Wow, is it that accurate?
It's that accurate, and it's faster.
In the future, we'll see the speed, accuracy, and overall capabilities get even better, opening up new and improved ways of controlling a game as naturally as breathing. There's also the advancement of bidirectional communication, which will allow for signals to not only be read, but also sent back, making it capable of stimulating our senses. You'd be able to feel the heat of the virtual sun, or smell the environment around you. This development in BCIs will be able to fool our senses into actually thinking that what we're smelling, tasting, and even looking at are all real. Therefore, replacing the need for VR and AR peripherals completely. Now, in a future like this, the games you play will be so realistic that you can effectively live alternate lives. So I have one question for you. If you could live in any game, what would it be and why? This assumes you can go back and forth between realities, because with these advancements, you'd be able to. Unless, of course, we get a Sword Art Online situation. But personally, mine would be Black Desert Online. While this MMO is paid to win, and I don't really play it anymore, the world is so huge and there are so many different ways you can play that I'd happily be transported to that world. You can play the entire game as a farmer, a trader, a fisherman, or you can choose the combat route and spend all your time grinding. Now imagine you can do all of this, but you're actually experiencing all of it yourself, rather than through the character that you're controlling. This technology reminds me of that game Morty plays, where he lives the life of someone named Roy. From childhood up to death, he experiences an entire lifetime of events in no time at all. This really makes you wonder what it would be like when we reach the capability of creating such realistic games. Will it be possible to mess with the way people perceive time? Well, personally, I have no idea, but there's no doubt that new genres are going to be created as a result of all this advancement. Games could leverage AI and the BCI to change dynamically based on your emotions. Imagine a horror game that knows when to scare you based on how scared you're feeling in the moment, similar to that episode of Black Mirror Playtest. We could have the level of difficulty raised based on how difficult we're finding it, providing us with heavily personalized experiences. We could also use this technology to help train our cognitive functions, where games require high levels of focus and control, and we're given real-time feedback. Multiplayer games could change drastically as we become capable of telepathic communication, where we directly share our thoughts and emotions rather than trying to put them into words. Alright, so it's important to note that while we will likely see this technology in our lifetimes, early on at the very least, it's going to be used to help people with disabilities. After that though, it's going to be rolled out to the general public with the aim of improving human capabilities and bridging the gap between humans and AI. The impact brain-compute interfaces and artificial intelligence will have, not only on gaming, but as society as a whole, is bigger than what we've seen with the internet, which is saying a lot. The internet has transformed every aspect of life, allowing for global connectivity and giving anyone who can use it the ability to access effectively all the information in the world. Communication will be instant. The way we learn and process new information will be significantly enhanced, and our healthcare capabilities will improve to the point of making us immune from most diseases. However, there are obviously a lot of concerns that come with such a big change. Ethically, how will all of these be regulated? Is it going to create a class divide of people who can and can't afford it? And if it does, how will this impact society as a whole? There's also a number of privacy concerns, with the idea that we're essentially making all of the information in our brain available to any potential hackers that might want it. Of course, new mental health issues could spawn. And over time, as this technology becomes more and more ubiquitous, will it ultimately end up being beneficial or harmful? Personally, I believe these are all things that can be taken into consideration. We had all of these issues and concerns with the internet, and while things like mental health and privacy are kind of still issues that we're facing, it hasn't really outweighed the positives that the internet has provided us. I'm optimistic that this technology would make gaming much more accessible to significantly more people than it already is. And as we create new ways to learn skills and ways of connecting with other people using our thoughts and emotions, we're bound to see innovation in every area of our lives. But let's save all of that for another video. For now, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about the future of gaming. So if there's any predictions or anything like this that I might have left out, comment down below and we can just have a little talk about it. Otherwise, I've left a link in the description to all the videos and all the websites that I referenced, so check those out if you need to. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching.